Welcome to Merkaba Chakras, where we talk Buddhism in the fifth dimension.
Welcome to another podcast episode of Merkaba Chakras. I'm your host, Vaughn Galt, and today we talk to author Jonathan Hammond about how the ancient Hawaiian teachings of Huna Wisdom can help us elevate our consciousness to higher levels with Earth and the universal consciousness within all of us. So, with that, Jonathan, welcome to Merkaba Chakras and aloha.
Wow, very good to be here. Good to see you.
Yeah, I do love some aloha in my life, so I try to sneak some of these in.
Understood. Well, I'm coming to you from Maui, so
Oh, I love it. I love it. And everybody stay safe in Maui because I was just talking to Jonathan and there seems to be some active wildlife going on the shores there.
yeah,
Okay.
a little shark bite a couple days ago. Not for me, but yeah, but it happens. It happens.
Oh, oh my. That's one of the things whenever I go to Hawaii, that's one of the things I'm always kind of like nervous about is because the sharks seem to be getting a little bit closer and closer, and I think it's just because we're just more and more people.
Maybe.
And people are just being more adventurous and all the different boogie boards and paddle boards and all the different things. And now everybody's starting to create them to look like animals underneath too. So not so wise, but oh, that's a whole different episode. So let's dig into this wonderful work that you have offered to people. So before we get into your work, can you, Jonathan, tell us your story for how you even got into Huna Wisdom?
Well, I was a shamanic practitioner for many years, and in my mind, shamanism kind of lived in South America, Central America, and so all my training was in that. And I worked with shamans in, well, now on 3 different continents. And what I was fascinated by was a sense of no matter where I went, there was a universal way of working and a universal way of thinking that all the shamans that I worked with seemed to have. And I didn't really know what it was. But I could feel that they were all drawing from the same kind of set of ideas. I've had the good fortune of just visiting Hawaii many times, and I never really thought to look here for spiritual influence. It was just like I said, Hawaiian shamanism wasn't on my radar. But I did have really profound experiences with the land, metaphysical experiences, ascension experiences. I write about them in my book, and that made me curious, and that made me look further. And then I came upon this shamanic philosophy that comes from the heart of Polynesia called Huna. And you've heard all of these ideas, but I'd never heard them in one place so eloquently placed. And what I found in really diving into the principles of Huna was that, this is the universal shamanic mind. And the reason why I named my book The Shaman's Mind is because it's from this philosophy that we can enter into or see through the lens of how the shamans think. And there are 7 ideas that I read about in the book that come from this philosophy that help the reader or anyone enter into seeing the world and seeing themselves through the lens of how shamans think, how they work with energy, intention, love, the present moment, to make things happen.
And, so there's a lot in how you got into here that I really want to kind of like explore a little bit more, because everybody comes into this experience a little bit different. And so just, some people will relate to certain things and be unclear about others. So what you said is you were coming into Hawaiian shamanism or Huna wisdom, or there's different names for it. But you said that you had some metaphysical experiences with the land. So what was the metaphysical experiences with the land of Hawaii that you had?
Well, there were many of them. There was just a sense, a basic tenet to what shamanism is it is a reverence of nature, and using nature as a template to teach us how to be. And
Okay.
just like all things in nature fit together, all things in nature are interdependent with each other. All things in nature are always moving towards growth and creation. And we could even say that if everything in nature is moving towards growth and creation, that anything that wants to create more of itself is fueled by love.
Mm-hmm.
So, so we in some way use nature as a template to teach us how to be, that we're supposed to be fueled by love and moving towards our growth and creation, knowing that we're interdependent from everything else as well. So a really basic idea in shamanism is the idea that everything is alive, responsive, and wants to connect. And what I found here was just a sense of, why do I feel like this tree is wanting to connect with me? Why do I have
Mm-hmm.
a thought form that is negative, and a big wave comes and smacks me? And then I have a thought form that is beautiful, and the wave changes, and and that sort of communication. And then
Yes.
I had a specific experience on the volcano Haleakala, that I read about in my book, and it was, I can only describe it as I took a hike into Haleakala, and I sat down, and there was a whiteout of clouds around me,
Mm-hmm.
and there was this, I was forced to lie back, and somehow I didn't cut myself on the rocks by the fact that I was really pushed back, because a lot of rock can be sharp. And I had this life review, this experience that I was communing with source, with God, with the mother, whatever you want to call it. And there was an awareness that it knew what was happening. Not only was I aware of it, but it was aware of me, and it was aware that this was. And at that time in my life, I was in a whole other profession.
Mm-hmm. What were you in?
I was a professional actor for many years,
Mm-hmm.
and I had always, not always, but I had been disillusioned with acting for some time, despite relative success in New York. And but I was really feeling a call to become more professionally spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
and it was in this visitation with Haleakala that I realized that it was time. And from that moment in that moment, I went, you have to quit. You have to create your practice. You have to create healing retreats around the world. And this was very counterintuitive for everyone who knew me. I went to a very fancy drama school. I did Broadway credits, all of that. And it was a very counterintuitive thing for me to say, it's time really to let that go.
Yeah.
And that was really the beginning of, and again, it was at that point I didn't even know what Huna was, nor was Hawaiian shamanism really even on my radar. It was just these experiences with the land that kept bringing me back here. And then
So you kept coming back. It kept pulling you back to Hawaii, huh?
Yeah, it kept pulling me back. And then I started writing a book on Hawaii that took a year and a half. And I was in New York City, and there was a sense of, as I was writing, that I was kind of channeling the islands in my mind. I just felt like I was so connected to, and I like I said, I have come here a lot. And so Hawaii was, and Hawaii kept showing up in New York, all over the place. I had an experience. I had
hilarious when it comes to that.
I had an office in New York City, and on one Friday a month, a group of psychics would rent it out, and do their psychic circle. And I didn't go that night. And the head facilitator called me at the end of their meeting, and he said, "What's going on with Hawaii?" And I said, "Why are you asking me this?" He said, "Well, all the psychics were getting these Polynesian gods and goddesses in your office, and they were on their phones Googling them, and we figured out that they were Hawaiian." And he had no knowledge that I had any connection there. So, via 5,000 miles away from the islands, I was just really downloading all of this energy and this wisdom from here.
Yeah. So that's the metaphysical experience that you had with the land, and you left, and it still was calling you back. Um, Now you said you had a life review also when you were having these experiences, or what you call ascension experiences, where ascension is just another fancy word for leveling up your consciousness to higher frequencies. That's all it is, people.
Sure,
Nothing
sure,
magical. It's just
sure.
ascending your frequency in
You know,
Buddhism.
and I would even say it's not even it wasn't even that it wasn't even that fancy. It was just a sense of, oh, everything in my life, every mistake I've made, every bad decision I've made, every wrong turn I've made, every misfortune has all led to, and there was a rightness to all of it
Right.
that has led to this moment and this shift in my life. You know,
Exactly.
and it was just in that moment where you know, in Huna we think of all time happening only in the present moment.
Yep.
And it was like my life up to that point just congealed in some way that that allowed me to move on with kind of a fresh set of eyes from that moment onward.
Yeah. So when you were reviewing your life review up
Yeah,
until this point, you had come to some understanding that, okay, it's time to let go of who you were as the actor in New York, et cetera,
yeah,
and embrace the energy healing instructor, teacher,
yeah.
Hawaiian wisdom,
That's right.
facilitator. Okay.
That's right. And then
Um,
it was about 7 years later that I wrote the book, The Shaman's Mind.
7 years later. Oh, you
Yeah,
had a 7-year crash course.
yeah,
That's
that's right.
that's really fast. That's really fast. I'm from the Hmong tribe of Laos,
Mhm.
and we have ancient shamanism that stems from the ancient folklores in Buddhism of Mu, or Lemuria.
Mhm.
And I'm actually following Buddhist folklores for a book series that I'm writing called Megaliths, Pyramids, and Tribal Folklores of Mu. So I start from Laos with a plane of jars, and I go all the way through the islands, connect all the megaliths and pyramids with the folklores and the spiritual traditions, which all very much are shamanistic and mystical, with the connection to nature and the all being, all the way, and I end up in Hawaii. So and that's the end of the Buddhist Lemurian art folklore archaeology that begins the spring forth into today's modern understanding of the remnants of Lemurian spirituality, that is very live in Huna Wisdom in Hawaii. So, can you explain how Huna Wisdom in Hawaii is a remnant spiritual tradition from the lost continent of Lemuria, according to your book?
Yeah. So there is, and again, no one can ever know. This is mainly channeled information. No one can ever know, but there's certainly enough, as you are doing in your own research. There's enough evidence to point toward something like this. But millennia ago,
Mm-hmm.
there was this huge continent in the middle of the
Mm-hmm.
South Pacific where Hawaii now stands,
Mm-hmm.
called Mu, MU. And this was a place. It's been theorized that the Mu people, and even the word people isn't the right word because they were really beings who were said to have come from the stars, in
Mm-hmm.
some way were attracted to Mu because they were attracted to the water,
Mm-hmm.
because the water, as the DNA of the planet, holds memory. And
Yes.
so these kind of off-planet beings came to sort of infect the water, so to speak, with the God molecule, with love. And just as we're all evolving, it was at that time of the earth is evolving too. The earth is waking up as we are waking up. And at that time, it was time for universal love, or
Right.
aloha, to come in and be infused in the water. And because everything is made of water or dependent on water in some way or touched by water, that God molecule essentially was the beginning of esoteric consciousness. Now, there's
Right.
another theory that says that Hawaii wasn't the recipient of that, but was, or sorry, wasn't the originating place of that, but the recipient of esoteric wisdom from around the world. And who really knows? But the point is,
Mm-hmm.
we're in a real vortex here.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the origins of love. That's why Hawaiians run around shouting love at each other, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because
I've heard that it's the heart chakra of the earth right now is in
That's right.
Hawaii.
That's right. And everyone is is literally saying love to each other, aloha, if you translate that word, to share life experience with another, to share happiness with another, to share joy with another. And every time that word is said, that's the so it's very infused in the land itself, this sense of sharing, this sense of and this sense of sharing happiness, that the sharing of life force is the creation of happiness that's infused in. And so that comes from really pre-Hawaiian anthropology, sort of spiritual anthropology.
Right.
So that's sort of my understanding of it. And again, I can't prove it, but it makes sense to me. And I think that is so much about what living a spiritual life and being on whatever spiritual path you're on is about, is that for some reason it feels true, and or it even feels like something that I want to believe. And that feeling of itself is enters you into a reality where that reality becomes more real for you.
Yeah, you manifest it, you attract it, you create it. It's created within your consciousness. Just for those who, because I have a lot of people who watch the podcast and they also read my other books, and I kind of touch a little bit about the remnant folklores of Mu or Lemuria in Buddhism, in the Buddhist spiritual tradition. So, the background for the Hmong Laos understanding of Mu is that, like, Buddhism was created by Siddhartha Gautama Buddha, the first Buddha. He found the basic principles, and then more Buddhas and more Bodhisattvas in the tradition added to it. It's basically just a university of metaphysic knowledge about how we create physical reality and form based off our consciousness and our psychology. The earliest Buddhism, if you go further into it, it's just basically psychology and psychiatry. So, because it is our consciousness that creates it all. Anyways, that's a simplistic understanding. And some remnants of Hinduism goes into it as well. And then in Southeast Asia, as it expanded, you have tribal peoples from ancient Mu and their folklores after the mega flood and the empire of Mu, and their shamanistic understanding of their connection to earth and universal consciousness also got adapted into Buddhism and recorded in art history in all of our temples and in our culture. So it just kind of got incorporated in, even though many Southeast Asian people and Laos people are Buddhists, it got incorporated in as part of the tradition because they jive very well. It's all very universal understanding of metaphysics and consciousness. Anyways, fast forward, that's the folklore. And as I started looking at the folklore for my project and started going to look and talking to elders at different tribes along from Laos all the way through the Pacific Islands, through Japan, all the way along the coast, all the way up to Hawaii, there is a similar story, and they all corroborate each other. And also, they all have megaliths and pyramids at their spots. I have yet to finish that project because I have to travel to every single one of these islands and investigate and take pictures for copyright of these megaliths and these ancient pyramid and remnant pyramids and the folklores from the tribal elders and associations to put the big story together. So what you're saying is not far-fetched from physical archaeological evidence that points to the folklores of Mu being a real existence. Because I followed a Buddhist folklore and I got 100% accuracy on finding physical evidence of pyramids and megaliths and folklores that substantiate it from all these small islands. So, so what you're saying is not far off. So these are remnant spiritual traditions that are held in Hawaii, in the Easter Islands, in the Samoan Islands, in Japan, going all the way to Laos. And I'm really looking forward to doing that. So, but what we have today as remnants, aside from that, is this beautiful wisdom that we can incorporate today into our lives. So, there are 7 principles of Huna wisdom that you write in your book. So,
Mhm.
what are these 7 principles? I know you touched on it a little bit earlier, but can you break these down so um, people can kind of get into it as they, once they get into it, they can go into your books, they can go into your healing
Yeah,
retreats and into your
yeah,
courses. So please explain the 7 principles of Huna.
yeah. So they're based on their unique translations by Serge Kahili King, who is one of my teachers, who is very much still alive, lives on the Big Island, of 7 Hawaiian words. And there's 7 ideas that, if you follow, help you enter into the mind of the shaman. By the way, this is my book, The Shaman's Mind, and which is all this material is in there in variation. So I'll just sort of go through them. We can, and if you want to stop at any point or ask a question, or we can do that too. So the first principle, Ike, is the Hawaiian word, and the principle is translated as the world is what you think it is. The world is what you think it is. So what this
I'm going to
principle,
stop you right there
yeah,
because that is a very basic. Some people see the world as an opportunity to create whatever they want, and others sees the world as a slave planet that is basically, imagine all the horrors.
and this principle is saying whichever one you believe, your reality will follow suit. So
Mm.
it's not just how you think about the world will determine your experience of the world, but the world itself, that reality itself shifts and changes based on how you think about it.
So
So this is about that we are truly in a co-creative relationship with our reality. And so what you're thinking about determines what your world is. And let me say this too, what you're
uh-huh.
thinking about unconsciously, which is the reason why we have to examine that, is also bringing your world into being.
I will give some people some real world examples from my personal life of exactly that. So recently I went to visit my father at the hospital. He's passed away, bless his heart and his soul. But before I had left, there is a restaurant in Seattle called Stanford's Restaurant. I love it. They have the greatest salad. I love it. Um, so anyways, love their food. I've been going there for years, but more than 5, 6 years ago, I went there with my husband, boyfriend at the time, and I wanted to go to get their food. It was closed, completely closed, bankrupt, shut down. The franchise shut down. And I came back recently from the airport, drove by, the restaurant's open. And it's out, and I called them. I said, "What happened?" They're like, "Oh, no, we've always been open. We just shut down for 2 years ago, just for some remodeling, but we opened." And I called my best friend who loves that restaurant too, and she said, "No, no, I went there many years ago. Beyond that, with my mom trying to take her when she came to visit, trying to take her to dinner at Stanford's, and because she loves the menu as well, and they were completely shut down. It was a commercial real estate sign that said that, future opportunities, call this number, et cetera, et cetera. So her and I were both going, whoa, it's bad. Like, I don't know if we shifted to another reality, we changed our consciousness, we changed the way that we view something, whatever we did within our consciousness, that we're in a reality where this restaurant that we love, where we both were bummed that it closed completely, is now open and always has been open. So now we're going to go there for date night and for double date night. So, so we're pretty happy. But we're gonna try to get there before the next shift in case the next shift is closed up again. People who are familiar with personal Mandela effects and shifting realities based on your consciousness know what I'm talking about. So it's a kind of a dance with reality to try to get the goods while it's still around, while you're still in that frequency. So that's one thing with that. And then the other thing about what you said about how your consciousness creates your physical reality, and we are having this relationship with it, is that if you are in a negative mindset about things and you can't get yourself out of it, you will continue to attract more of it to teach you a lesson so that you can overcome it.
Maybe it could be to teach you a lesson, or it simply could be that because that's where you're lending your consciousness. That's something that that's something that comes into being. If you think of it more in terms of a sense that because when you talk about lessons, you're talking about spiritual influence, right? And so if you think of that, the spirits that hover around the planet, that want to have the bodhisattvas, to use a Buddhist term, that they just want to help, but they can only work with what we believe, and we partition off and cordon off our what's possible for us based on what it is that we believe. I often use the example: if you're a woman and you're 35 years old and you bought, and mom told you that if you're 35 and you're single, you're going to end up alone. That woman who believes that about herself. As much as the spirits would love to stick the guy next to you on the subway, the spirits have to work with that belief.
Yeah, unconscious beliefs.
Because
you're like, where did it come from?
Because the spirits would go, they're not even, this person isn't even looking for it. They don't have a belief where that can even exist. So expansive belief systems give spirit simply more to work with. And that's really a way to think of it. And it's not and so again, in the same way, it's anything that you are lending a lot of clout and legitimacy to that's negative, then becomes how you see the world and how you see yourself in relationship to it, and the world that you will attract. And so it's just, and just to say this too, it's fascinating nowadays with because truth is so up for grabs, and that's been sort of politically sanctioned, that that there isn't, and what's very interesting is because everyone has these different truths and these different beliefs about that, they will actually attract in evidence on their social media that will mirror back their beliefs. So you really will attract in a world, even if you're believing something that isn't consensus reality.
Yeah. I'll say something that I'm entitled to have my own opinion about reality and stuff, because it's my reality too.
Totally.
So, and if people agree, great. If they don't agree, that's perfectly fine. You create your reality, I'll create mine. But even because we're coming out of the quote quote pandemic and going into the endemic phase, there was a time where I remember watching the news, and they were saying that the vaccination statistic for COVID was over 50%, like 57% or something like that. And they were trying to get to 70% herd immunity through vaccinations instead of naturally. And then for myself, I'm not a big fan of vaccination passports and section off areas and privileges for the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. It just opens up too many areas just opens up a can of worms. Because I, doing energy healing and being of the energy healing and this concept, an idea of consciousness in everybody, there is people who actually have natural immunity to a lot of things as well. So nobody's really factoring that in. So anyways, that's just my personal opinion. When you get it, great. If you don't get it, no problem. Everybody has a relationship with the doctor. Everybody has a different relationship with the body, and everybody's walking around with different immunity. I get it. But the passports and the special privileges for those who are vaccinated and not vaccinated, I'm not really on board with that. And when I made that decision, because I usually just kind of let people stick to their polarizing views, because that's their decision. And I usually stay in the middle. Stay in the middle. This is what I typically do. But when I do see it really, really polarizing, I do form an opinion. And my opinion is that is where I stop. That's the boundary. And once I made that opinion and I started watching the news, it changed to now there's only in the United States. Last time I heard in the news, it was 37% of the US population was vaccinated for COVID. And that's drastically lower than what I had read and watched in the news before. So even the news is changing. And I don't know if it's because I made a hard line, conscious decision that this was not the reality that I wanted to support and manifest, where everybody had to show their vaccination passports and to get from point A to point B within society. Because when I had a taste of that, and this is when I made a hard line decision, I had a taste of that when my father passed away at the hospital in Fresno, and I was booking $1,000 flight in the red eye to go and see him to say my piece. And there was a whole page with 8 or so different recommended mandates for your vaccination. And I was not going to book this huge flight and leave in 3 hours if I was going to be, if I was going to have some pushback. So I called Alaska Airlines and they explained everything to me. And they said, well, where you're going in Fresno, there is, you're not going to LAX, you're not going to San Francisco. There is none of that. You just have to wear a mask at this time. But those are for other cities. So it's like, oh, perfect, great. So I booked it and went to see my father before he passed. But I got a taste of what that lifestyle was going to be like if we went through vaccination passports and privileges and section out stuff. And I was not interested in that hassle, because when somebody's dying, you don't need those obstacles to get to your loved ones. So I made a very clear decision. And when I made that clear decision, some elements of the pandemic change. So I say that because I want to get your opinion on how this first rule of Huna Wisdom, what does it say about that kind of,
Well,
when
let me say this.
when you make a strong conscious decision about something, how does
Well,
that change your
let me say
reality?
this. So I have a very large private practice. I work with literally hundreds of people, and things got really busy and have been continued busy since the pandemic started, because everyone's freaking out, right? And
My private practice for my sixth senses went crazy too, but
yeah. And so, like, one of the things that has become very clear is that there are pervasive narratives about, let's say, COVID, that you watch on television, that are actually not the narrative that any of my clients were having. All my clients during the most of 2020 were really growing, and they were recalibrating their lives, and they were leaving relationships or entering into new ones, rethinking their jobs, all of that,
yeah.
And so from my perspective, I think of COVID more like a spirit, because I think it works on each one individually. Now that is just the way in which I have experienced it. Similarly, I have clients who absolutely believe that the vaccine, they want it yesterday. They want it yesterday to move on, and that's right for them,
Right.
And they don't have the side effects or whatever. And then I have other clients who are very much feel like that would be something that would be very unhealthy for me. And I think that, like, what the opportunity at this time on the planet, the last 2,000 years. This is Carl Jung wrote a book called
It'll come back to you.
It'll come to me. It'll come to me. But he wrote a book in 1951 and talked about that the 2,000 years since Christ's birth was the age, was considered the Piscean age. So this is a time when we would struggle with the battle between good and evil, a battle that we would not win
within ourselves.
Yes, and it's a battle that we would not win, as epitomized by Christ and his teachings. And that in December of 2020, and Carl Jung wrote about this in 1951. In December of 2020, we would begin the age of Aquarius, and the age of Aquarius is a time when, as Jung characterized it, when each of us would individuate. Which means that rather than a battle between our light and our darkness, we would integrate the darkness. And so, and that's what Jung means by the individuation, that we take the darkness, we bring it up to the light of awareness, we look at it and we integrate it. And so that means that everyone individual, that now we're entering into a time where everyone individually is developing their own sense of what is right and true for them. And so I think that what's been going on the planet, what's been going on politically with the virus and with the vaccines or no vaccines and masks and no masks, is all just about like an invitation toward a different level of autonomy. and a
Yeah.
different level of your own decision making and your own sense of what's true and right for you.
Mhm.
And so I feel like it's just in alignment with what's going on. So,
Right.
so that's really my take on it, is that I don't think that there is a pat answer to anything. You know,
Mhm.
I think it's about what is right and true and good for you.
Right,
You know,
right. The thing that I found interesting in my recent experience, because I really, when it comes to these polarizing topics, or when it comes to these debates, I really just kind of watch as an observer to see how each side grows. And what I found very interesting is when the shoe drops on the other leg. That's what I call it. The shoe drops on the other leg. Now you're wearing the other person's shoe as if you are them. And so usually whenever some things are so polarizing, so black and white, something new emerges from the middle
sure,
that doesn't want to be part of either side's
sure,
arguments or stance. And that's typically me. I don't want to be part of either side of the
sure.
banter, because I see it's the yin and the yang fighting out, and you have to find a balance to move forward. And so, we're all collectively putting our little piece into the greater bigger picture, and something's going to shake out. But you know, what I experienced going through that experience, with my father's passing, was that this bantering back and forth is causing a lot of struggles for people just trying to live their lives. So, like in my situation, I was just trying to make it to Fresno to see my father before he passed, and I got all these, restrictions. And my doctor was like, "Do you want me to write something that you're exempt, that you got paralysis from the flu shot? Do you want me to? Is that what they need?" And I said, "No, let me talk to them, etc." So we figured it out. I got through it, but that was a taste of what that kind of society would be like. And that's when I made a decision. I do not want it. And I'll write it out. So the with the Huna wisdom, this one is the first one, and this is a very, very important one, your perspective. And it starts with this one, because if you get this one, the other ones are easier to get. Because this one is hard for people to understand, that your consciousness creates your physical reality. And from that decision on how you see reality, your relationship with how reality is created forms. So what's the next ones? So
Right. The next one is, the Hawaiian word is kala, and the translation is "there are no limits." So what this is really saying is that it is a limitless universe, and that means that anything is possible if you can figure out how to do it.
mhm,
And so what we're really getting at with this principle is a sense of not only limitlessness, but a sense of that there's only one thing. We are each a part of that limitlessness, which means
mhm,
there's only one thing happening, and we are each individually experiencing that one thing. We are the aperture through which that one thing is experiencing itself, which means that because there are no limits, what I heal in myself, I heal in the all. What I
mhm,
develop in myself, I develop in the all. What I withhold from myself, I withhold from the all. So it's about a sense of a real personal responsibility that we're taking, because what we do, no matter what we do without ever leaving our house, from this perspective, affects the collective.
mhm.
And so it's really about the recognition that we are really truly connected to everything.
And it
And
goes
that,
back to what you're saying about the Carl Jung book that you were reading, that said that everybody's integrating and becoming unity consciousness,
that's right.
becoming.
That's right. And the more whatever individual work you do on yourself, that
Mhm,
affects the collective. My teacher,
yeah.
Sir King, he said something in a class once that blew my mind. He said, "Well, if you want to heal someone, think of them and you feel good."
Yep.
And that's really what we're talking about, is that we heal the world by healing ourselves, and we invest in the world by investing in ourselves. you know So
Yeah.
so that's that principle, that it's a limitless universe. We're connected to everything. And because it's a limitless universe, to align your beliefs with more of a sense of limitlessness
Mhm.
is to invite in so many more possibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I never have a New Year's resolution, because that limits something. A New Year's resolution creates an expectation. I'm going to XYZ. I'm just like, make it great.
Yeah, well, you know, I do tend to hold one expectation always, and that's to expect the best.
That
Because
still opens it up.
if you expect the best, even if you don't get the best, it'll be way better than where you are now. You know,
That's
so
good.
so that's an expectation that I like to hold. Yeah.
But what's the third law?
The
Or the
third law,
third?
third principle.
principle.
A Hawaiian word is called makia, and the translation is energy flows where our attention goes. Energy flows where our attention goes. So what that means is that where we place our focus and attention with consistency, elicit creative energies that bring to us the nearest equivalent of what we're placing our focus and attention on. So what you focus on or give attention to with consistency, there's energetic considerations in what you're focusing on. So we live in a symbiotic relationship with the creative energies of the universe, and that relationship gets focused by our focus. And so this is why it's so important to pay attention to what you're paying attention to, because what you're paying attention to is eliciting the energetic blueprints that are bringing what you're paying attention to into form, into matter.
Yes, and just for you Buddhists out there, that's what they call a Buddha. Bud is a Sanskrit word. I keep saying this over again, for someone who is awake within a holographic matrix.
And you know, my
Be
teacher,
aware.
he's my surgeon, my teacher surgeon, but I think he's 84, and he is, when he teaches a class, it is just, he's the most he is so aware of what's happening in the present moment. He's so awake. I remember teaching all day, and then I was there the next morning, and people were asking, "Oh, what did you do last night?" And he said, "Oh, I sat with my wife Gloria, and I translated a documentary into Portuguese just so I could work on my Portuguese." An 84-year-old man, after he taught all day, just like, but that's what we're talking about, and that's why what's happening in your sphere of awareness. And will there doubt come up? Is there crap that will come up? Is there fear that will come up? Of course. But what you're doing with it and what you're choosing to focus on and give legitimacy and clout to through your focus and attention is what's going to bring more of that about, or create more things along those lines. So really being aware of what's coming up on your sphere of awareness in every given moment is what this is about. You know, a lot of times when I teach this material, I'll say to the class, even before I go through the principles, I'll say, so I'm going to give you these ideas, and they're amazing ideas, and you're not going to do it. And because this is about practicing these with consistency, that your beliefs create reality all the time, you know, that you really are connected to everything all the time, that what you focus on invites in energy to bring about what you're focusing on all the time.
If you do it all the time, that's when the student becomes a master of their own domain.
That's right.
Because they're doing it now. It's muscle memory.
That's right.
It's muscle memory.
And from my book, this is what I saw that the shamans that I worked with, they all thought this way. You know, and you know, even something like as simple as Reiki, you know. So you put your hands on someone, if you're Reiki attuned, and Reiki happens. So I sort of think of Reiki, it's just how I think of it, as sort of this energy, this light comes in the top of my head, moves down, splits off of my heart, goes into my hands. And that's how I visualize it. So if I'm visualizing that, have I created a reality to make Reiki possible?
Yeah.
That's exactly what I've done.
Yeah.
You know, and then the Reiki happens because you're in the reality where Reiki is possible.
Right. Right. You're in your bubble reality.
And so this is the thing, you get to choose what that is for you. You know, I'll give the example sometimes of if you have something that you have a question about, or you want advice about, and you take a walk in the forest with the intention of the forest giving you the answer by the time you finish your walk. The forest will start talking to you. But if you don't do that, it's a walk in the forest.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just a matter of what reality you're entering into and you're entertaining. And because it's a limitless universe via the second principle, that reality can be anything that you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's moving you toward your own growth and creation, that's a good reality to choose.
Yeah.
That's in alignment with nature.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. That's the third principle. What's the
The
fourth
fourth principle
principle?
is a Hawaiian word named Manawa, and it means you'll love this as a Buddhist, but now is the moment of power.
Mm-hmm.
Now is the moment of power.
It's the only moment.
Well, it's the only moment, but it's specific in this tradition because it's saying, yes, it is the only moment. There's only right now, but it's also saying that now is the only place where you can access power, because now is the only place where you can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mhm.
so there's a sense of, which means that you can change the past now,
Mhm.
and you can create the future now, and you can
That's
only
true.
do that right now. You know, and so
That's true.
yeah. So this principle is, and in that way too, it's about that all of the things that you've done in the past, you go, oh, why did I do that? It's embarrassing, or like all you have to do is in the now really look at, I didn't know what I didn't know. I simply didn't know what I didn't know what I didn't know is such a cause of needless suffering for so many of my clients. And in the now, you can just choose a blanket forgiveness and start over.
Yeah.
You know, so this principle is really getting at starting over, and that if you want to do anything, you do it right now. And who you were yesterday is not who you are right now. If that's if you think that that's who you're not right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're constantly integrating all aspects of ourselves, past, future. We're always integrating. It's kind of like when you're graduating high school, you've integrated all the curriculum and the experience that you have gotten all the way up until then, and you just integrate it into a higher version of yourself. That's all we're just ever doing of our consciousness. Let me tell you something. I'm just going to relate this to some of my clients that I had this last year as well, and I've had for quite some time. For Six Senses, I get clients who are coming in for their personal Mandela effects or reality shifts, and they are puzzled to why their family history has completely changed. Certain things that were pivotal in their decision as a young adult was based off of family history that no longer exists or has completely changed and altered, and they're baffled. And I always remind them of this exact concept. You did something and you changed your perspective on that person, on that situation. You forgave it, you accepted it, you no longer hold anger or resentment for it. And because of that, that energy was released. And so you release yourself from that density. And because you release yourself from that, you raised your frequency and got to a higher version. That higher version has a different alternate history. So be thankful that you have a better version of your loved ones to enjoy. And so they're like,
And
oh,
that's
okay.
and it's also, if you think about it, the past is where is it? It only exists in memory. It only exists in memory. And so if you change if you change what the memory symbolizes, you change the memory. You know, in the Hawaiian language, there are no past or future tenses of verbs. Everything only relates to the present moment. So in Hawaiian, if you were to say, I'm going to the beach to go snorkeling next week, the rough translation of it would be, my going to the beach next week to go snorkeling hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
You know, or yesterday I went to the store and bought milk becomes, my having gone to the store yesterday to buy milk is now over.
Yeah, it in Buddhism, in advanced Buddhism, just to relate for those people, that would just be basically being in your crystalline consciousness or your Christ consciousness. Christ is another word for light. It be more light, and light is timeless and exists currently right now. So if you think of you understand that consciousness is in you, all it's doing is, I haven't focused on going snorkeling yet. I haven't jumped to that experience yet. Right now I'm focusing on this. But as soon as I switch focus to that parallel experience, I'll go there.
Yeah.
And that's how you can heal, because you're just healing whatever's there right now. Yeah, I love that. What's
Yep.
what's number 5?
Number 5 is aloha, which we've already talked about. The easiest way to understand it in terms of a principle is that it's the only ethic. It's the only thing that we're looking to be present in every action that we take. And so is love's perspective present? Is what am I doing right now leading to joy and happiness? And so it's just something that we always look at is that in what I'm focusing on, in what I'm doing in the present moment, in what I'm choosing to believe, is love's perspective present? And just to say, only you can decide really what that is, because this does not mean that we walk around as airy fairy love beings all the time, because sometimes the most loving thing to do is to end something, to put up a boundary, to let someone go.
That's a hard one for people to understand, because it is if somebody is doing something destructive, enabling them or helping them keep it going longer may not be the most loving thing that you could do for them.
Just to go back to shamanism for a second. So, the idea that in that all of nature just wants to keep going. There is a yearning to get the nature does not deny itself what's good for it. It doesn't turn its back on itself. The tree opens to the rain and extends its roots down to the soil and wants to keep going. And anything that would want to experience more of itself is fueled by joy, is fueled by love. And so to align with love and to take actions that are in alignment with love is to align with flow.
Yeah.
Is to align with the flow, with the intentionality of nature. And if you're in alignment with nature, you're on the right side of things. And so that's how to think about it. Is what I'm doing right now, is it moving toward my growth and creation?
Right.
And that when we make those choices, that's an act of love. That's the intentionality underneath it.
Right. What do you say to people who look at negative things in life or negative actions of people, and they demonize them, as a way to see them as less Christ inside them or less light inside them? I would say like negativity is just less light, less love. But if you look at it, you address the issues that cause that, and you remove that, then it becomes its natural state.
Well, what blocks aloha? What blocks aloha?
Yeah.
What blocks aloha is judgment and criticism. That's what, and because the world, the outside world, is a reflection of something about you. Hear me, because of the world is what you think it is, which means what your world is in some way a reflection of something about you. If you find yourself with something to judge or criticize, or a person to judge or criticize, those very qualities live in you.
You only recognize yourself.
That's right. So, I would say, and also remember that whenever we lash out, when we judge, when we criticize, when we condemn in some way, we actually have to run that energy through our system too.
Yeah, we have to process it.
So the way to be in alignment with aloha is, rather than judgment and criticism, bless. And even just bless what it is that you want. Bless the people who have what you want. Bless that person's ability to get your goat. But just that's a way to stay in that. To stay in that. And Serge once said, he said, clearly I'm a fan of my teacher, Serge, but he said, I never get disappointed in anyone, because people are always going to do what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And that's a way to keep yourself clean. And to not run that energy through you. Right.
You pointed out something that I want to remind people, because a lot of people look for teachers to learn things from. A good teacher will teach you and leave you to learn and to teach others. If you don't become a teacher from the material you teach from the teacher, on a new teacher. That's my personal opinion. Okay, that's what teachers are supposed to do, because they want to retire. They want the student to teach.
Well, and it is about, this work is about
Passing it on.
it's about paying it forward. I've never worked with a shaman or a shamanic practitioner in any of the places where I've worked with them, where they said, I'm going to teach you this, but don't tell anyone about it.
Or keep following me forever.
Yeah, or keep following me forever, or anything like that. It's about paying it forward,
Right.
Yeah,
right.
And if you have a half day of knowledge, teach the half day of knowledge.
Right.
There's no hierarchy in shamanism. There's no boss shaman. That's not a thing. There's a sense of respect, but there isn't a sense of there isn't a sense that someone's higher up than someone else. That's not what it is. What in shamanism we're looking for effectiveness. Does it work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If it works and it could be applied in life and it works, then it's effective. My mother-in-law, she actually teaches hula and Hawaiian language, and she has her whole life since she learned it when she was 5. So she's a Hawi Wahine that's teaching hula and Hawaiian language. But I think it goes from a pre-life or a past life when she was doing that.
Mhm.
So how is aloha expressed in Hawaiian language and dance? Do you know that?
How it's expressed in dance?
In Hawaiian dance and language, how is aloha expressed?
I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. I can only say that we would think of it like that, like hula, for instance, tends to be the movements, the chants, they're representative of the natural elements, and in some way, the celebration and the reverence of the natural elements. I'm certainly not someone who could speak intelligently about hula. That's not my background. But I would think that it was just about that celebration, about that reverence, about the idea of that I'm simply honoring in hula. It's the honoring of the Hawaiian environment, just to honor it.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. That's exactly it. That's the right answer. Bing, bing, bing. Okay, let's go to number 6. What's the number 6 principle?
Yeah. So
these principles are wonderful. Just studying these principles alone.
Yeah, they're so deep. They're so deep, and when you get into them and you follow them, they're really, really helpful. So the 6th principle is a Hawaiian word called mana, and mana. The translation is all power. All power comes from within. All power comes from within. So clearly, we're talking about divine power, of which, because of a limitless universe, we all have access to. And it's also about that the decision or the authority. Another translation of the word mana is authority. And I like that word because the word author is in there, to author your life. The authority of your life.
Love that.
But there's a sense of that the ability to create your life comes only through you. And this is actually, we know this as spiritual people, but this, more than anything else, I find is the hardest principle to follow, because in contemporary society, and we're even wired this way, we're wired to assimilate, wired to fit in. Jung talked about the superego, the part of us that is constantly, what does everyone think? How am I doing? How am I fitting into cultural values and norms, all that? And so the need to assimilate is something that is that we all have. And the problem with it is that it pulls us away from inner directives and the invisible forces of spirit.
Yep.
And we're in other people's truth. And so this is such a hard principle to follow, because when we assimilate, we actually can really get off our spiritual path, because all these structures are in place for us to follow and to enslave us, frankly. And if
we're walking around like with other people's belief systems and then following whatever construct we accepted.
That's right. And so if you think about what a healer is, a healer is someone who's holding a consciousness that says you can do it any way you want to do it.
Right.
And the person who goes to the healer is the person who's done all the right things. They have the right boyfriend. They went to the right parties. They went to the right school, and something doesn't feel right. And they say, I'm doing all the right things. I'm following all the rules. It's not working. And the healer is the one that says, they're the wrong rules.
Yeah.
They're the wrong rules for you.
The wrong rules for you.
For
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And you have to decide what that is. And, you know, something like, you know, I give this example a lot. You know, if your dharma is, I'm going to open a bed and breakfast in Costa Rica, and that's what I'm going to do. You know,
yeah.
Sure. And if I follow my inner directives and the promptings of spirit, I'm going to end up opening a bed and breakfast in Costa Rica. That you can't find that paradigm in assimilating. That's got to come through you.
Yeah.
You know, because a bed and breakfast in Costa Rica is not something that anyone's going to say, oh, go do that. That's culturally sanctioned. You know, and so it's just an example. But the point is that how do you follow your own inner promptings first and foremost? And in this way, you don't owe anyone anything. There comes a point where we all have to go, we don't owe anyone anything. And I have to decide what's true and real and right for me. And the hater's going to hate, the judge is going to judge, whatever. But that's what this is. That's what this principle is really getting at. Is that the power to create your life can only come through you. Even the idea of giving your authority away, the power within you gave your authority away.
Yeah, that's true. You belittled yourself.
So, but and it's your own authority that gave it away to authority over you. You know, and if you think of the nature of power, there's power over, which will just cause retaliation and fear. Because mana is about power. There's power against, which will cause tension and that. Yeah. And then there's the power that comes when we empower. And how we know we have the power is if we can empower, because we have the power to give away.
Right.
You know, and so that's just a way to think about it. And that we each have that. We each have that, but we have to, but it only comes from within us. And no one can tell us that we have it. No one can, in some way, you know, do some spell to let us know we have it. We have to. It has to come from us.
Right. So when you guys, and this is a very good, you know, number 6 principle is very, very good because it relates to a lot of different things. Energy healing. Everybody can do energy healing, and the reason why everybody can tap into energy healing for, you know, common day stuff is because they are source, they are consciousness embodied as a fractal aspect of consciousness. So it's just all just little mini, I say we're just mini egos of source, but that's just me, but we're mini fractal expressions of the same consciousness.
You say mini egos of source?
Yeah. Mini egos. We're like, oh, you know, ego is your identity. Yeah, so we're all just little mini egos, mini identities of source in all. Yeah. Playing different parts for, you know, just for growth, amusement, fun, all that kind of stuff. Know itself. But anyways, and we're just all going for the ride. Mini egos going for the ride. But the thing about it is that you know, the more I do this stuff, the more I tell people over and over again, it just keeps going back to the concept. Listen, you are human. And if you break down the word human, Hu actually means God. It's another word for God, Lord, consciousness, source. It is God in man. So just identifying as a human is to recognize that you are source consciousness in man.
Well, let me take a step further. And what do we do with God? What do we do with God? We worship God. We revere God, which means that that's what we're supposed to be doing for ourselves. And when we do that, we actually enter into, that's what makes us godlike, is the recognition that we are that by treating ourselves as that. And when we do that, we enter into a sympathetic vibration with God. Right. Because we're creating God down here. And that's so much a part of that's so much a part of this work. There's a Hawaiian phrase called Aloha Ma. And that means a self-reflective love.
Mhm.
and it's considered in some ways the highest aspect, because if love is being reflected back in your sense of self,
Mhm.
that means it's reflected back in the all.
Yeah.
Just a way to
Yeah.
think of it.
Yeah. So many good things to take out of principle number 6. What is the last principle?
The last principle is pono, and
Mhm.
pono is a word that means truth, true condition of nature,
Mhm.
and the translation is this one. This one's unique. You'll get it right away though. Effectiveness is
Mhm.
the measure of truth. Effectiveness
Mm.
is the measure of truth. So what's true is what works, and what isn't true is what doesn't work. And
Yep.
this and I love this principle because it really says that the only thing the only absolute truth is that everything is.
Mhm.
Other than that, it's all just something that someone made up based on whether or not it's effective for them.
Right.
So, and again, shamanism more than shamanism isn't so much about mystical states, although certainly they're there. Isn't
Mhm.
even necessarily about a sense of an enlightenment state, even though that we may visit that. Shamanism is about effectiveness, about living in a human body on this earth
Mhm.
in ways that are in ways that increase enjoyment.
Yeah. We're just here to remember, like you were saying, for principle number 6 is to recognize that you are God in body, you're a source in body, whatever. And to be honest with you, the word God has been given so much controversy that some people they can't even use that word. So more light in yourself. But anyways,
To say, you can absolutely you can think of it as energy, as chi, as prana,
mhm,
as a universal love. I mean, there's so many ways to think about it. The
yeah,
one that doesn't work for me is the one that is an off-planet othering thing that has good days and bad days and judges. That just and it's usually male. That's
yeah,
that's absolutely not what I'm talking about when I say God. I'm talking about source. That thing that's beating your heart.
right. And you mentioned something that I wanted to bring out, because there is this concept in some spiritual circles of the Galactic Federation, the Council of, whatever. No problem. But there's still source in those as well, directing the orchestra of the greater creation of samsara, the greater creation of this big masterpiece that it is experiencing. So, what are your thoughts on people who put so much of that godly, reverence, pedestal on the concepts of the Galactic Federation of, or the Council of, or
It's
the off-world beings
Sure,
of?
sure. It's not something I relate to. I think of it this way: the more realized we become, the
Mhm.
more full we become, the more love we have in our life, the more abundance we have. The organic impulse, when that happens, is
Mhm.
to pay that forward, is to
Mhm.
in some way help others with theirs.
Right.
And I think that if you think about what is a truly realized human, it's someone who is at a point where they've done their own work enough that they just want to help. And
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
that's what, when we talk about the spiritual beings that hover around the planet, that's why they hover around the planet.
Yeah.
That's all they want to do is help.
Yeah. Because they
You know.
recognize we're all connected. So all they're doing is helping aspects of themselves.
So
You
yeah,
know,
so I think of it. I think of it more like that. They're a little bit farther along, or they've done it enough to where they really get it.
mm,
But essentially, we are. The Hawaiians very much think of themselves as. There's an aspect of it, particularly ancient Hawaiian, of a sense of that we are godlike. that
yeah.
that we, that we you know we emulate God by that God is in ourselves, and there's a sense that we're not really all of that different.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is not just kind of talking in these traditions. It's already been scientifically proven, and people who've read my books are all very scientifically based. we're all connected. There is consciousness in everybody. There's one stream of consciousness in everything within creation. The good guys, the bad guys, same stream of consciousness in all. And we are all interconnected. So this has even scientifically been proven.
Well, and
But
along the same lines, you know, I'm a Caucasian man, although I'm very tan because I live in Hawaii. But I'm a Caucasian man who wrote a book on this material, and you know, the cultural appropriation piece has come up, and I'm very sensitive to it. And in fact, portion of the proceeds of my book go to a Hawaii Wildlife Fund just to pay that forward. But I'm sensitive to it, but I also am at a point where I think we all have to realize that there really is only one mind.
yeah,
Of which we can all tune into.
yeah,
And that all of this esoteric wisdom that heretofore, you go back 50 years, you can't find a spirituality section at Barnes & Noble like we have now.
yeah.
And we have to assume that the spiritual intelligences of the universe know what they're doing in bringing all of this spiritual wisdom to the fore. All this esoteric wisdom, Hawaiian shamanism, you're turning on your computer and learning about that today. We have to assume that that's happening for a reason. And it is because part of where we're going is around more people need to have this information so that they can help others. You know, because of this big change that we're making.
Yeah, within ourselves, within each of us.
Within ourselves, and just the ascension of consciousness on the planet. You know, which isn't that sounds too highfalutin. It's just moving more towards love, moving more towards cooperation, moving more towards being ecologically minded. That's what we're talking about.
Well, let me ask you something real quick too about principle number 7, effectiveness as the measurement of what works.
Yeah.
What about people who, you know, who really, really still believe in the devil and you know, just kind of the whole devil hell and the cabal and, you know, whatever, you know, you want to brand this concept that is always going to keep you down. How can somebody find the effectiveness and find the truth out of that to recognize that they are source embodied and they have control to create whatever they want to, and there's nothing holding you down besides yourself and your belief in it? Going back to the first principle, your belief in it is what creates your reality and what you're experiencing. So how do you address that one for people?
Well, yeah, a couple things. You have to want to. See, there are benefits in our stuckness, always. There are always benefits. There are benefits in compromised situations that are chronic, that keep happening, compromised patterns. There are always benefits. You don't have to show up. You don't have to feel feelings. You don't have to find out the bad news if I tried and it didn't work. There's all kinds of reasons why we stay stuck, you know. And there are all kinds of psychological reasons why aligning with the idea that I might be bad, or I might be unworthy, or I might be unlovable, given that childhood, and given the fact that children take everything personally and adapt and gain a sense of self based on how they're treated. And so there is a sense that people can very much align their sense of self with negative qualities. But they would have to want to actually heal that and change that. And it's always a case of mistaken identity, always. But it would have to be a choice, you know. And there's there's a sense of, you know, with something like hell, there is a sense of that punishment is appropriate. That punishment is appropriate for me in some way. And it's something that keeps me in line and all those things. And I just
it doesn't seem to have a lot of aloha in that perspective.
There isn't. There just isn't a sense of there's certainly intentional harm that exists in Hawaiian cosmology or in anywhere.
Yeah.
But the idea of a kind of badness, eternal punishment, it's just not something that
for young souls. Yeah.
It's just not something that I really relate to at all, you know. And I just think it's divine, you know. When you think of someone that you would consider evil, it's just how their divinity has so been obscured.
Right.
So obscured, so forgotten.
They're so lost. They're so lost and they're forgotten. I like to say sometimes that when you demonize certain people and you create these labels to demonize them, to belittle them, you allow yourself to separate your unity to them and separate source and consciousness in them, so that you feel justified to see and act in a negative way. And that creates your own imbalance in your life. And that is something that, again, is something that you are going to have to heal, because we know that source is in everybody. And the more that you continue to label and continue to drum that viewpoint, the more you put them in that box and not allow them to find the light inside them and raise themselves up.
This is a little judgmental, but take it how I mean it. If you think that if we could all just, and we don't even do this, clean up our own mess enough that it doesn't spill over into someone else's experience. If we could just do that, and that's not a big ask, but that's really where we are. And I feel like the inability to do that, or the refusal to do that, is what I would consider, kind of true negativity or true sort of sin in some ways. Not that I like that word, but I don't, for lack of a better word.
It's ignorance. In Buddhism, we would call it ignorance. The only real sin that humans, or embodied gods in man, the only real sin that we really have is ignorance, is not understanding the full picture, understanding and that's why there's always that life review. Love number 7. I love number 7. That really gets into a lot of esoteric debates. And we do a lot of debating in Buddhism. So let's go into the healing. So you start a bunch of healing retreats all over the world, and you teach some of your courses. So what are some of the things that people can learn in and experience in these healing retreats and courses that you offer?
Well, I guess just to go along with the book, I mean, there are a lot of healing practices in the book. The cornerstone practice, which is a kind of a cornerstone Hawaiian healing practice, is this practice called Ho'oponopono. And Ho'oponopono is, it roughly means, we know that word pono from the 7th principle, rightness, but it's doubled ponopono. And ho'o means to make or to cause, so it's to make right more right.
Not that you made a mistake, but that it was part of the experience to make it more right.
That's right. Right with yourself, right with God. That's another way to think of it, as within, so without. But Ho'oponopono, as I teach it and as I understand it, there are lots of different versions of it. I teach 2 in my classes, but the one that I teach mainly is the one around the parts of us that don't like ourselves very much, that are chronically scared of money, that are addicted, that think that we're unlovable, that think we don't look right, that think we're not smart enough, that they, all those things, that those are learned things. They are learned things that, and when we learn them, they make sense for us to learn them that way. Because under the circumstances, of course, I would feel unlovable. Under the circumstances, of course, money is scary. Of course, under the circumstances, of course, I don't look right. And so the healing practice is really about, Ho'oponopono is about going directly to that hurt part, seeing it for what it is, and it's 5, it's 6, it's 4, it's 14, and because formative years are called formative years for a reason, and in some ways, sending love, attention, forgiveness, and gratitude to this part of you. And there's the whole process that you go about doing that, so that this inner child, this inner child that's hurt, that has a case of mistaken identity, is in some way learns and is reparented toward a new understanding of themselves. And that new understanding is one in which they look exactly like they're supposed to look, in which they're smart enough to do exactly what they're supposed to do, in which money is, there's always enough, whatever that is. But you're actually, but Ho'oponopono more than anything is about making right something, an obscuration
Yeah.
that we in some way adopted, and we consciously go in there and change. And so Ho'oponopono is it's a healing practice, but it's also, I really think of it as a way of life. Because if we are giving, the 4 I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. If we're giving that to this hurt part of us, to this child who's been hurt over and over and over again, in the actions we take, and who we invite into our life, in what beliefs we choose, and whether or not we learn and read the shaman's mind to make our life better, whatever that is, that in some way we are in a constant process of remembering our divinity. And Ho'oponopono is about restoring the original divinity. We all come in perfect. We all come in a perfect being, a stainless, blemishless canvas of divinity, and then we go through the process of forgetting it. And Ho'oponopono is about restoring that.
Right. Yeah. So basically, it's just about diving into where did you pick up these belief systems about yourself that you are projecting and creating unconsciously from.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's basically doing your own deep dive psychology.
Well, what I love about this philosophy, particularly Ho'oponopono, and we didn't touch on it, we probably won't today, but the idea of 3 selves, or 3 aspects of being, 3 aspects that we all have: the body, the mind, and the spirit, essentially. And the aspect of 3 selves that's in Jungian psychology, Freudian psychology. A lot of original peoples have these 3 aspects of self. A lot of earth-based traditions, Wicca has 3 aspects of self. And what I love about when I came across Huna was that this was not only a shamanic philosophy, but a shamanic psychology. What we thought, what Freud and Jung came to, had long been discovered. And long been discovered in a way that was more complete, and that included the spirit in a more integrated way.
Right.
Thousands of years before contemporary psychological models that we know. Right. And that's what I love about it. So it really is about like shamanic psychology.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. The Lemurian spirituality is live and kicking in Hawaii. In Hawaii, Huna. So I love it. I'm definitely looking forward to finishing out that book series to round off an end of Hawaii. Your book, The Shaman's Mind, goes into more details about what we discussed today. So are you working on online courses to offer people if they can't make it to the retreats to learn?
Yeah, so the best way to make sure you're on my mailing list, go to mindbodyspiritmaui.com or jonathanhammond.com will take you there too. And there's a way to sign up. I do have a course based on my book, a video course based on my book that's coming out in the next couple of months. We just finished filming it maybe 2 weeks ago, so it's now in post-production.
Fresh, yeah.
But that's a way in which you can, if you get on my mailing list, you'll get an announcement when that comes out. And I have a monthly shamanic circle that I do online that is something that people can come. Right now, I just finished the whole book tour and all that, so I'm giving myself sort of the summer with no classes, and except for the video course that's coming out. But that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. And I also do private private consultations, private spiritual counseling with people as well. And we even do, a lot of times we'll do energy healing via distance. I do that as well. So all that's on my website. You can find me that way.
Yeah. You're working as much as I work. They are having us working, aren't they? Jonathan, what last message do you want people to know as they build the 5th dimension here on Earth, and as they harness more of that infinite consciousness within themselves? Last message.
You're better than you think you are. It's better than you think it is. Healing is real. It's like a thing. It actually exists. To follow love. Follow your love. If you follow your love, and how do you do that? You focus on what it is that you want. And you don't focus on what it is that you don't want. And as simple as that is, if you actually make that a practice, that aligns you with flow, with love, with nature.
I love it. I love it. Well, Jonathan, thank you for providing your spiritual teachings in Huna Wisdom from the ancient teachings of Hawaiian shamanism. I'm glad to see that the Lemurian spiritual tradition is alive in the Polynesian islands, in Laos, in Southeast Asia, and in Hawaii. So, and that there's teachers like yourself and others sharing the information. So for more information about Jonathan's offerings, please visit his website, which is mindbodyspiritmaui.com. And thank you to our listeners for listening to another enlightening conversation. Until next time, blessings.
Mahalo. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Merkaba Chakras, where we talk Buddhism in the 5th dimension. For more information about today's guest, please go to the show description. For more information about Vaughn's metaphysical work, please go to merkabachakras.com. The views expressed today are for entertainment purposes and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or replace any medical or legal advice. Don't forget to subscribe for more interviews about the 5th dimension. Until we meet again, blessings.